We are not here to be nice. We are not here to be nice. We're here to have our lives set on fire with purpose and passion. We are not here to be nice. But don't get me wrong, being nice is a good thing. And I hope you're nice. We ought to be nice. But let's not confuse that with why we're here. When we come to die, is that what we want people to say about us? He was nice. She was a nice person. Is that enough? It's not enough. We are here to come alive like a blazing fire. Somebody's soul's going to catch on fire. And there are two ways that people's lives catch on fire. Isn't that great when there's just two ways? It makes it so much easier when there's only two ways. No. Be skeptical every time somebody tells you there's only two ways to do anything. But nevertheless, there are only two ways to set your life on fire. We either come alive through paying attention in a real way or by accident. And I have to say here that a Zen Buddhist master said a long time ago that the only way people become enlightened is by accident. And so the reason for meditating, he said, is to help us become more accident-prone. All right? So that's it. The reason we come to church is to become more accident-prone. The only way that our lives ever get set on fire with passion and purpose is either by accident or by paying attention. Right? But here's the catch. The catch is that there are enormous consequences to paying attention. When we pay attention, we can't escape the pain, the tragedy, and the injustices of our lives and of the world. When we tune into what's real, all assurances are gone. We are naked before the incredible uncertainty of our lives and our deaths when we pay attention. When we start to pay attention, we may lose our religion. If you came here from another faith or another denomination, it's probably because you began to pay attention and started to question the faith that was taught to you as truth. See, when we start to pay attention, you can lose your religion. We can become an exile from our own culture, from our own family. That's why the fire of inspiration is closely connected to grief. Until we know how to grieve, we cannot know how to come fully alive. When Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple Computers, died, which was recently, I understand he's being memorialized this day in California at Stanford University in a chapel. And it was in Stanford that he gave the address to the graduating seniors a few years ago, and that address went viral on the internet after it was announced that he died. And so a lot of people read it. You may have heard it. Here's what he said back then. He said, "When I was 17, I read a quote that went something like this: if you live each day as if it were your last, someday you'll most certainly be right." It made an impression on me, he said, and since then, for the past 33 years, I have looked into the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today? And when the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, he continues, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things all fall away in the face of death. leaving only what is truly important. He goes on, remember that you are going to die. It is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason to not follow your heart. This is sage wisdom from Steve Jobs. Here it is again. Remember that you are going to die. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking that you have something to lose. You have nothing to lose. You are already naked before the world. There is no reason not to follow your heart. He continues. About a year ago, he says at this time, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had a scan at 7:30 in the morning, and it clearly showed a tumor on my pancreas. I didn't even know what a pancreas was. The doctors told me this was almost certainly a type of cancer that's incurable, and that I should expect to live no longer than 3 to 6 months. My doctor advised me to go home and to get my affairs in order, which is doctor code for prepare to die. It means try to tell your kids everything you thought you'd have the next 10 years to tell them in the next few months. It means to make sure that everything is buttoned up so that it will be as easy as possible for your family. It means to say your goodbyes. Then, within 24 hours, some tests were done, and he learned that he, in fact, had the rarest form of pancreatic cancer, the one that is curable by surgery. At least that's what they told him then. So he said of this experience, this was the closest I've ever been to facing my death, and I hope it's the closest I get for many decades. Having lived through it, I can now say this to you with a bit more certainty. No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it. And that is as it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention in life. Next to the iPad, I would just add to that. He says, death is life's change agent. It clears out the old and makes way for the new. Right now, the new is you, he says to this graduating class. But someday, not long from now, you will gradually become the old and be cleared away. Sorry to be so dramatic, but it's quite true. Steve Jobs looked out at these young students as I'm looking out at you right now, and he said, your time is limited. So don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most importantly, have the courage to follow your heart and your intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. Now, speaking of iPhones, Steve Jobs came alive before he died. He let his life catch fire and he changed the world. Now, we can't all be Steve Jobs. We're not all meant to be Steve Jobs. We're meant to discover the unique shape and pattern of our own life. He says, most importantly, have the courage to follow your heart and your intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. So, how do we then go about following our heart and our intuition, especially those of us who have spent so many years trying to numb ourselves so that we can barely feel what our hearts are trying to tell us? Now, I spent a period of my young adulthood, I haven't talked about this with the church before. Maybe I should call it my late adolescence. Numbing myself. Right? I left suburban Illinois for college when I was 17. Not because I had a fire in my belly to learn, but because that's what kids like me were supposed to do. Instead of a fire, I had a fog. The sacred spark of life inside was smoldering under a cloud of smoke. I don't know if all the drinking and the drugs that I was doing back then was the cause of the fog or the result of the fog. But what I do know is that my life lacked substance. And like everyone else whose life lacks substance, I found some substances to abuse in order to fill the hole that was missing. Right? That's what drugs and heavy drinking are. They are substances we abuse because our lives lack real substance. They are a poor substitute for coming truly alive. What messes people up is that when they take drugs, they have an experience of feeling connected, of feeling whole, of feeling joyous, of feeling at peace despite the craziness of their own life. And the reason that it is so compelling is because that's how it feels to come alive. That's how it feels when our life catches fire. And what's confusing is that those of us who go down that path often confuse the feeling with the drug. Right? In other words, what the drug is doing, albeit in an unhealthy and shortcutted way, is it is giving us a glimpse into our own capacity for wholeness, for joy, for connection. It is giving us a taste of what it's like to live in the world with profound peace despite the world's insanity. The drug is not actually doing it. The drug is just the agent that brings on the experience. What we experience is our innate capacity for euphoria and peace. We experience what it feels like to come alive. And then we get trapped. And then we get confused about what we're feeling. Because it's great when your life comes alive, when you feel connected and whole. But by missing this distinction between an artificial experience and the real thing, people keep going back to the drugs, thinking that the drugs are the source of that feeling and the only way that they can find it. And what they've really tapped into is their own capacity that all human beings have when their life catches fire about something real and purposeful. Pretty soon the drug begins to smother the fire within somebody's life instead of setting their life ablaze. Now, I was fortunate because when I was 19, I had the opportunity to participate in a semester of college on a ship that sailed around the world. And it was on that trip that I started to learn how to pay attention. Now, some people will call it the sea breeze, and others will call it the breath of God. But whatever it was, something on that voyage blew on the coal in my heart and set it ablaze. It was that trip that got me to start paying attention. And remember, when we start paying attention, there are huge consequences. When we really start to pay attention, we are brought face to face with life's uncertainty and cruelty. That's why a lot of people don't do it. For me, it came in the form of pirates trying to board our ship and trying to rob us as we were making our way through the Suez Canal. In seeing the bread lines in what was then communist Russia and realizing that the ideas that we have about property and ownership that I'd always taken for granted here in the United States are only agreements that we have made, and they can be changed. It was in seeing things like the Museum of American War Crimes in Vietnam. American war crimes? I was taught that we were always the good guys. And the Museum to the Unfathomable Victims of our country's bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which burned countless little girls and their mommies on a beautiful day while they were walking to school. It was in seeing a suitcase in a display at the concentration camp in Auschwitz that had written on it what looked like my family's name, and realizing that it belonged to someone who was put on a train by gunpoint and who died in that camp. The white fog of a middle-class, suburban American childhood started to burn off, and a fire ignited in my belly. I saw that the rules that we think that we live by are only agreements, and that these rules can and frequently are changed. I saw that the world was made up of people who make the rules and everyone else who lives by the rules and decisions that other people make. And I saw that as an American who had a chance to go to college, that I had the opportunity to be one of the people who helps to write the rules, rather than just someone who lives by the decisions and dogmas of others. And yet I was wasting my life getting wasted, while others made the decisions, and while yet others starved without food from Oklahoma to Africa, and died without vaccinations, while children were being exploited in sweatshops, while women were being denied opportunities, while people were being sold into slavery for work or sex. Poet David White writes about these kinds of revelations in our lives. He says, the moment you start living as if your place in the world matters, the moment you start living as if your place in the world matters, and realizing that the world could neither speak nor hear the fullness of its own bitter and beautiful cry without the deep well of your body resonating in the echo. When that fire starts burning, it sets aglow a light with which we begin to see our own capacity and to see our own responsibility. It is inspiration tinged, as all inspiration is, with grief. When we realize that our life matters, suddenly we can no longer live the life we had before. We die to the life we had because we know that now we can never hide our voice again. It reminds me of Moses before the burning bush. He took off his shoes, he kneeled down, because he knew that at that moment, from that moment on, he would die to the life that he had, because he knew that in that light, he could never hide his voice again. He kneeled down. Have you ever kneeled down before such a revelation in your own life? Or is the coal in your heart smoldering under a white fog of smoke, barely staying lit? Or is it blazing with passion and purpose? Now, author Michael Meade says that there are two ways that the light inside us, in our current culture here in America, gets messed up. He says there's the white fog of suburban and rural kids and their parents doing drugs out of boredom, or gambling, or drinking heavily. Pick your addiction. Pick your escape. And because they do it because they lack a sense of substance in their lives. And then there are the kids and the parents in the inner city whose fire is burning so red hot with violence and crime and destruction. And each year, Michael Meade brings men and young teens together in the redwood forests of California for a week. It includes half professionals from all over the country, lawyers and doctors, social workers, artists, cooks, writers, ministers, and half gang members and ex-convicts. About 100 men of all ages and all different ways of life together for a week in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by giant trees. He discovered that bringing them together transformed both. He said that those who are living with that white fog, when they are brought together with those with that red-hot heat in their lives, it starts to burn away the fog. And those who are living with that red-hot heat, when they're brought together with those who've been living under the cloud of that white fog, start to cool down a bit. Now, I had the privilege to spend a week with this group a few years ago, and it is one of the reasons that I am so committed to making sure that in this church, we bring people together from all walks of life. Whether it's in worship on Sunday morning or going down and volunteering in the schools and all the different programs and activities that we do. Because we need each other. We need each other to kindle the inner fires, to set our lives ablaze with passion and purpose. We need each other. Just imagine what our world would look like if more people discovered what brings them alive and spent their time and their energy and their resources doing that with the one precious life we have. Imagine what the world would look like if more people tapped in to the fire inside them and lived that passion. That is the world that we are trying to create. Remember, we came from the fire of a supernova. Fire is the very substance of our being. And it is our job now to transform that fire through the paintbrush, the pen, through the outstretched arm, and our embracing hearts. You are not here to be nice. You are here to realize that your life matters. There are people dying out there, starving, sick, needing things. You are here to realize that your life matters and the world cannot achieve its fullness without you. Pay attention. Pay attention, because wherever you are when it happens, and believe me, once it happens, it continues to happen over and over and over again for the rest of your life. Wherever it is, wherever you are, whenever it is, remember to take off your shoes, because you are standing on holy ground. God bless you. I love you. Amen.